Okay, hello everyone. Hi Ashley, hi Stephanie. All right, so why don't we go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to our discussion with Lindsay Tabas, when you want to change the world, but you don't fit into the workplace. And hold on, we have a chat. Hi Stephanie.
Hi, Stephanie.
Yeah, super excited to be here. For anyone who doesn't know me, I'm Bella McCaffrey. I'm the CEO and founder of Work Bigger. Everything that we do at Work Bigger is about challenging the status quo. In this case, redefining work so that work is a vehicle for creativity and change, really making a difference and also living a better life. Today, we're going to be talking with Lindsay Tabas. And real quick, the way we provide support is through content, community, and also programming. And part of the content is the Work Bigger Story series, which is why Lindsay is here today. Work Bigger Stories are interviews with women who are mission-driven, and they're changing the world in a number of ways. They're either pushing through current boundaries and challenging the status quo by redefining work for themselves. They're starting new companies, or they're aligning with organizations that are in line with their own values. Before we jump into our chat, I just want to cover some quick logistics to get that out of the way. This call is being recorded, so you'll have access to it after. If you're a part of our Work Bigger community, this is also on Facebook Live right now. If you have any questions, just pop into the chat, share it with us. Lindsay and I are gonna be chatting for about 30 to 40 minutes. I block out an hour here just to give us some extra time, and then we'll save some time for Q&A. So with that, let's get started. Welcome, Lindsay.
Hi, how's it going?
Good. And before I let you jump in, I just want to give a little bit of context to how we met. Lindsay and I were connected through a community called Dreamers and Doers, and we randomly got set up as accountability partners. And I believe this was now in December of 2015. So we connected right away. I mean, we were both going through a really difficult time. I talked extensively about my burnout. Lindsay was going through a similar burnout. And we connected not because of those struggles, but really because we had and have the same values. And I would say that's a big part of the reason why we've stayed close and why we've become just good friends and have relied on each other through this whole entrepreneurial journey. So with that, Lindsay, do you want to share with us a little bit about you and how you got started?
Okay, awesome. Well, my life started when I met you, Bella. Born and raised in Philadelphia. When it comes to my career, I designed my first user interface, so a computer interface, in 2002. I was studying systems and information engineering at University of Virginia, which I'm very proud of. When I was there and I was in that class, I became obsessed with this idea of designing technology for people. And I remember in early 2004, it was the fall semester of my senior year, I sat on the stairs looking at my parents, and I was getting really excited about this idea of designing a fully immersive gym for overweight children. I grew up overweight, and so it was like this idea was percolating. I was really excited about what it could be in the future, and I took that as my personal essay to apply to graduate programs. I ended up moving to San Francisco and starting a 2-year program, master's program at UC Berkeley. It's called the School of Information. And I thought my passion was designing something for overweight children, and I pursued that for, a year or so. And then I moved on to something else that was interesting and interested me. I was super excited about working in the startup community. Google had just gotten started. One of my first nights in the Bay Area, I went to a workshop at Google. I thought this was going to be so cool. What I found out, unfortunately, when I graduated in 2007 was that not that many other people in Silicon Valley cared about the customer and the people part of technology as much as I did. So I got started in enterprise software. I did consulting. I was totally embarrassed around the Bay Area to tell everyone that I worked at a software company that designed doctor's office software for audiologists. I felt so lame being like, I work in the hearing aid industry. But I did amazing work while I was there, and I got great experience. Nevertheless, it was hard for me to break into startups because startups just were hiring software developers. If you wanted to be a designer at Facebook at the time, they didn't have a role as just a designer like they do now. You had to also be able to program the interface too. So that really laid a baseline of a lot of internal struggle for my career of really caring about the people, knowing that I had a great skill set being an engineer, and liking the people part and being able to translate between the two. You think it would be a great skill set that people wanted, but it just wasn't what Silicon Valley wanted. And so I really struggled. I internalized that a lot, left San Francisco, moved to New York, continued working for other people. And as we probably will continue to talk about how I struggled working for other people, I just don't know how to do it. My parents were both entrepreneurs themselves. So that's how I got started, and I'll continue any stories from there later.
Yeah, no, perfect. Thank you for that. I want to jump now to your mission. Can you share a little bit about the work that you're doing now and, what that means from a mission-driven place?
Yeah, so my mission is to increase the success rate for compassionate. And when you see it written, I have the COM in parentheses. So both compassionate and passionate, people-minded startups and entrepreneurs. So I am going fully 100% saying that I really only want to work with entrepreneurs that are also passionate about the people side of the technology that they are developing. That was a big step out for me because I spent a lot of my career trying to fit into Silicon Valley. Finally realizing that Silicon Valley doesn't care about customers or people, and I needed to double down on that to make sure that we design ourselves into the future.
Yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit. So when you say that you want to work solely with people who are passionate about the people side, can you tell me why and where this mission and focus comes from?
So it definitely comes from me diving deep into myself more recently in the past year or two, but also, realizing that what initially fueled me and got me so excited when I decided to go to San Francisco 10 years ago or 12 years ago now was that I loved the idea of designing for people, right? And then when I look throughout my career, I remember one particular story that highlights why the people side is so important. A coworker told me after doing some interviews and design exercises with customers, he said my face lit up differently than it did doing anything else. I knew as of 2 or 3 years ago, I didn't want to be the best user experience designer. I wanted to really focus on the total kind of design of a business that's going to help people. So whether that's officially a social enterprise or it's people that are just entrepreneurs that really want to know their customers well. There are so many entrepreneurs out there that are not focused on the customer. You'd be surprised how bad it is.
Yeah. So I want to jump into something that you said. So Lindsay and I did an interview on the blog before we are doing this call now. And something that you said in your interview has really stuck with me. Digging a little bit deeper now into this fitting into the workplace and also trying to balance your ideas, your point of view, and trying to bring those into a workplace where, they're maybe not fully accepted. So you said, I blamed all of my struggles on myself. And so I learned over the course of my career to dress, act, and say what I needed to to be successful. Sorry about that. So let's talk a little bit about that experience. One, what was that like for you? And then what did it lead to?
I got in a lot of trouble when I worked full time for people because of all of my ideas. I'll start at the beginning. When I started at Berkeley in 2005, I was only 21 years old. I turned 22 at the end of September. I was by far the youngest person that had ever gone into this program.
Mm-hmm.
And that was something that was pointed out to me all the time. But I luckily held my own intellectually with my peers, and it was a great experience. When I took my first job in 2007, my first full-time job in 2007, I was working on an enterprise software project with a consulting team, and I was responsible for the human factors, which is, user experience, user interface design. And I had my first client-facing meeting to meet with a client to collect requirements. I went with this older woman. She was maybe like 10, 14 years older than me. We went into the meeting with the client, and we came out of the meeting with the client, and she said to me, "Wow, I was so surprised. You did really well with the client." And I'm 23 going on 24 at the time. And that was really hard to deal with. I remember showing up at back at the headquarters for a consulting company, going to talk to a woman who's still my mentor today, crying about the fact that I wasn't getting the respect, or getting any respect. And I don't want to say the respect I deserve, because that makes me sound like hoity-toity and a snob about where I was. But I understood from that moment that my age, not only my gender, but my age, was something that people were gonna judge me on before they even knew. And so that kind of started this pattern. I dyed my hair darker than it is right now, and I used to have it blonde in college, so I went from blonde to brunette. I thought people would take me more seriously if I had darker hair. I think I was lucky to work with a boss in my second job that personality-wise, we both really clicked. So I didn't have to worry about how I really presented myself in that environment. But it came up again when I took a job and moved to New York. I got this great job, or what I thought was a great job, at a hot startup, and I got fired after 4 months. And so that was a really hard pill to swallow. And after that, I started to fear that I looked like a job hopper. There was a bunch of things that happened in between. I had really only stayed at one job for a year and 8 months. Everything else was shorter, much shorter. And so I really got very insecure. So not only was it difficult to find companies that wanted to hire people like me that were customer and user focused, but on the technology team, on top of that, my resume just, to me, screamed, fail, 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 fail. You can't hold down a job. Something is wrong with you. So I felt the cards were stacked against me, and that was 2012. In the process of being unemployed and looking for a new job, I was so intimidated by interviews, so anxious. I didn't know how to present myself. I hated being judged. And I hired a career coach. And so this is like a bigger part of my second half of my career of trying to fit in, is that I spent 3 months with a career coach to understand my personality and then analyze all my new coworkers' personalities and figure out how I could respond effectively to each of them so as not to create problems in the workplace.
So even when you hired support, essentially what you were looking to do was fit in to what was out there versus tapping into what you really want and really who you are to break out of that.
Yeah, and I'm actually tearing up a little about the idea of that point in my life. It was great because it helped me. We did a DISC assessment, and I do have a link that I can share later, or with where you can take it for free. But
Yeah,
the DISC
absolutely.
assessment is gives you like ranks you on 4 traits: dominance, influence, steadiness, and compliance. And so I was really high D, so I'm very opinionated and passionate, but I'm also high I, meaning that people like me or listen to me. I had a coworker say to me just 2 years ago, Lindsay, you talk so much in meetings. It can get annoying. I hate it, but then you're always right. She's like, okay, but you're always right. And so those two are like hard, are really amazing, but associating the high D with a woman, let alone only one of 2 women on a team of 20, is that's how you get labeled the B word, right? Those are the women that get labeled the B word. So understanding, for instance, one of my coworkers I worked closely with, he gets stressed out very easily. And this shouldn't be my problem that he gets stressed out very easily. But I learned to respond to him. There's 2 ways to respond to stressed out people. You either say, oh my God, that's so stressful, and you agree with them and you get hyper with them, or you say, it's okay, calm down, I got it taken care of. And so my coworker always felt better when I did the latter. And one, it's extremely exhausting to be so strategic all the time about how you respond to your coworkers. 2, I ended up doing a lot more work than I should have been doing, because I truly did think that some of these things didn't matter, and it was just better off if I did them myself. Obviously, that type of behavior doesn't get rewarded. So, on this particular team, I became like not labeled, but leader, right? Like, people depended on me for so many things, but when I asked for like a raise or influence, I wasn't getting any of that, because they don't survey all of your peers and no one's going to admit that they let you do like 25% of their job, right?
I see.
So I was taking care of a lot of people on that job. That was the first time I got really burnt out, really, really burnt out. And so I started to resent having to adjust myself all the time for other people. I didn't mind being like the bitch. I didn't mind it. I understood it because I knew I was right. And I usually was. I had more tech experience than anyone else on the product team. But it just annoyed the crap out of me that I had to put so much effort to subjugate myself for other people, to slow down intellectually, to carry people along. And I know that's a great skill, to sell people your ideas.
Yeah.
I don't have the patience for that. I just don't have the patience for it.
I was just going to say, so there's 2 things that are going through my mind as you're talking. One is, no, we shouldn't have to adjust ourselves to other people. I agree. I think it's absolutely exhausting. On the other hand, I do think the opportunity to learn to respond to people in a certain way plays into that influencer part that you talked about, because today we're all selling our ideas, right? And no matter where we are, whether you're in a 9 to 5, like in a 9 to 5, and you're like, you have to navigate office politics. So you're a salesperson, whether you like it or not. Mm-hmm. And I think learning to deal with difficult personalities can play such a big advantage to your work. But on the other hand, doing so in a way that doesn't feel exhausting or draining, or where you feel like it's so hard that you have to shift yourself so significantly, and then you're doing yourself a disservice. So I want to call that out, because yes, there's a benefit, but I also think that there's a fine line that we shouldn't cross in the process.
100% agree. That same DISC assessment, I did a sales course last year, and I think I shared that with you. It was based on the DISC assessment. So knowing that DISC assessment is so important for evaluating your audience and who you're talking to. It's one thing to do that for a sales call. It's another thing to do that every single day with your coworkers, especially when you're working on technology in a highly collaborative environment. Highly
Such a good point. Exactly. Yeah.
It was nonstop. It was nonstop, so.
Yeah, because you're on the same team. So if you're constantly finding yourself having to convince and sell your ideas, and like you said, it's collaborative. So there has to be like some mutual connection and agreement and values on what you're working on. Otherwise, it's an uphill battle.
I will say this to kind of say this towards the work bigger community. What helped me get through that first year at that job, I stayed for a year and a half, which was probably 6 months too long, but I was so self-conscious about my job hopper status that I forced myself to stay for over a year, and that was a mistake. But this is what I'm going to say. I took that job for 3 very specific reasons. And this is the advice I give to anyone who's looking at new jobs. It's like, what are the 3 things you want? What are the 3 things you want to get out of this job, right? So on this job, it was a startup that was working in the angel investment space. So I wanted to learn everything I could about startup fundraising and angel investment. I wanted to work on a team. I wanted to work with another user experience designer. A lot of the times, user experience designers fly solo. Like they're the one token person that cares about the customer on the product team or the technology team. So I got that. And then I wanted to work directly with software developers, because sometimes you get, what's the right word? You get blocked from working directly with the software developers. Maybe the software developers are in another country or in another office, but I wanted to work really closely with developers because I'm technical and that's where my skill set shines, and I wanted to learn from that. I got all of those 3 things out of this job, and I focused on those 3 things for like the first 6 to 8 months. I realized the other UX designer who was my boss I was working with, was not helping me at all. So most bosses don't become your mentor. And I learned all I could about angel investment, and the learning kind of, slowed down. And working with software developers was wonderful until the project started to fall behind, and it became terrible to manage those deadlines. But essentially the learning stopped. The advice that I give people is like, know what those 3 things are so that you can focus on those 3 things when other situations in the office get contentious or, are annoying you, right?
That's your anchor, right? Like that's what you're holding on to. You have these 3 goals. That's what you're working towards. And I think that also makes leaving so much easier, because at that point, you know what you came there for. You got that. And then making that decision to transition is a lot easier. And I love what you said too. And we talk about this in Work Bigger. One of the things that we do in the program is working to find your mission, like your big picture, your vision, what you're working towards. But sometimes, right, certain people may not find their mission right away because you need to go through certain experiences. So I always say, make sure that you're clear on the experience that you need to go from A to B, right? So that whatever it is, you're pursuing it with intention. And it sounds like that's exactly what you were doing. And essentially that's what allowed you to exit.
Yeah, I think that the one thing that you have to keep in mind with those 3, or the one mistake I see people making, is that they define those 3 after they find a job that they're excited about, right? So most often people are running away from a job instead of towards the new job. And they're also looking at the new job and so eager to get out of the existing one that they identify 3 things that they want from that job, but those 3 things that they want might be lowest on the priority of their needs. So identifying those 3 things before you start your job search and really committing to finding yourself a new next step that meets those three things is really important.
I love it. I think that's huge. Yeah, versus as an afterthought.
I see that Leah is agreeing, so that's awesome.
Yeah. Hi, Leah. So happy to see you on here. So I want to talk a little bit about now. So it seems like you were in this really difficult, stressful, exhausting, and draining situation. So tell us what you did to get out of it.
So the one thing that you have to know about me is there's another kind of test quiz out there that's called human systems design. Someone just introduced this to me, but it finally put me in perspective. There's people that are generators who respond to life events and respond to choices, and then there are people that are initiators who like lead straight ahead into the bold unknown. I've learned that I am actually a generator, which makes sense because I wasn't going to study engineering until I took AP Physics, and the teacher in high school pushed me to do it. I didn't know I was going to study systems engineering, but then it seemed like that's where all the cool kids were going, so I kind of went there. There was all these like things that I responded to that came into my life, and they ended up being really good choices. So now I'm trying to harness this, but this will explain what I'm about to tell you. I left my job in 2013, at the end of 2013, that full-time job. And that ended up being my last full-time job. I didn't know that, though. I took a new job with a company, and it was a temporary to permanent contract. So I would be working there hourly for 6 weeks. And then at the end of the 6 weeks, we would decide if this was a permanent position or not. It turned out not into a permanent position. They wanted to find someone that was $40,000 a year cheaper than me, so there was really no negotiating. At that point, we weren't on the same playing field. And so all of a sudden, I found myself totally unemployed with no income. And I had an anxiety-fueled week, talked to a million recruiters. One recruiter, Joanne, came into my life, and she's still in my life today. So this was 2014, so 3 years. And she set me up with 2 different interviews, and I had a new contract 1 week later. So I literally only had 1 week where I wasn't billing anyone. And then I was like, oh, this is how freelancing works. So it was at that point where I started to become a freelancer and a consultant. Backstory is I also was running an e-commerce shop. That was my first real business. At the end of 2014, I decided to close the e-commerce shop because I got through my first year as an entrepreneur, but it was from doing tech and design and not from selling workout clothes on this e-commerce shop. So that it was 2015 when I kind of doubled down on like me as a business with my skill set.
Yeah. Awesome. I want to change direction. I want to talk a little bit about creativity, because you have so much value to add here. Also, this is another thing that you and I really connected on. I remember back when we met in December of 2015, I've always had this passion for creativity because I feel like when we're working from a place of creativity, to me, it really means when we're accessing flow, right? We're getting lost, we're in the zone. It's when we're coming up with our best ideas. That's really what we need to be tapping into. Right. To me, that is the definition of real work. And I see now that there's some changes being made at certain companies. Managers are talking about empowering their employees to tap into flow and to really work from that place. So I'm super excited that you also focus a lot on creativity. And you said, well, first, let me back up. How do you define creativity as a software engineer?
So I said this in the interview that I think my definition of creativity as an engineer is different than maybe an artist's form of creativity. First, I believe, and the engineer in me really defines this, and my dad was an engineer, and we've talked about this, but Creativity is finding a solution or an answer using the time, resources, and skill set that you have right now. So a lot of people talk about real creativity comes from some, box that you put yourself in, and you have to figure out that what can happen inside that box. So creativity, engineering creativity, the box is, well, how much time do we have to do this? What kind of resources do we have? Do we have money? Do we have, and then skills is kind of a resource as well. But do we have the money? Do we have the time? And then do we have the people? Do we have the amount of people to do this? And then skill set wise, this is something I've always been obsessed with, is individual, unique traits and characteristics. So I will never propose a solution that the team, whether it's the team I've been on or the people I'm working with, don't have the capability to execute on. Like, they don't have the skill set to do it. They don't have the time to do it. They don't have the money to do it. So I always say, as when I was a user experience designer and selling myself, most user experience designers come from a visual background, and then I came from an engineering background. So I always said to the software developers, I won't design rainbows and sprinkles. I will design something that you can build in the time that you have. And that has been a big selling point for people, because I'm super efficient. That also has annoyed a lot of people that I worked with who wanted me to tap into some like blue sky creativity with every endless possibility. And I always saw that as a waste of time.
Yeah, what you're saying, and I completely agree with you, creativity is really solving problems based on the constraints that we have.
Right.
And I'm actually also a big believer in constraints. I feel like it pushes you to think about what isn't right in front of us, right? Mm-hmm. So I actually think constraints are a gift. Sometimes we feel restricted by them, obviously, or we see them as walls, but to me, it's an opportunity to find what we can't see right away. So right. Exactly. With that, I want to read to you something that you said in your interview. You said people tend to get anxious when encountered with a problem. So they jump very quickly to the first solution they identify. What's wrong with that?
Well, you're finding a solution that everyone else finds.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I can go a little theoretical into what physiologically happens in your brain when you experience a problem and you create stress. We hear about the anxiety is like your body feels like you're running from a tiger or a lion or something. You actually shut off like the top part of your brain. So you're really only responding instinctively, right? And you're not taking the time to think like thoroughly about all your different options. So when you respond from stress and anxiety, you are either going to take the first solution that relieves the stress and anxiety right away, or you're going to give up and do something else, right? Or find like a totally different option that's not productive and not right for you. Mm-hmm. This comes out specifically for creativity, specifically for entrepreneurs, specifically for innovation. Innovation is a process, right? Innovation is not a thing that you obtain. And so my point about sticking with the problem is that that's where true innovation comes from. So often we jump straight to a solution and then we try to rework the solution based on new input. If you spend more time understanding the problem, brilliant things will come out, right? I tell my clients, really figure out the most valuable problems. So in Silicon Valley, we talk about the minimal viable product. But there is no minimal viable product unless you know the most valuable problem, the problem that your customers will pay you to solve, right? So Albert Einstein has this great quote. He says, I'm not smarter than you. I just stuck with the problem longer. And I have a great example from one of my clients this summer. She's working on building a dating community, building a more kind of healthy and loving relationship community. I'm doing a disservice describing it. It's called Underground Unattached. But she came into the program thinking, oh my God, I'm going to build like a physical community center to replace, to make a place where people can like meet monthly, and then they get all these additional services, and I'll do all the event planning. And she had a whole business plan, but she was totally overwhelmed with the idea. And the first thing I had her do the first week of my program is simplify the complex. So you're so overwhelmed with the solution and all the possible things you can do. Simplify your journey by sticking with the problem and figuring out what's that one problem that if you solve it, again, people will pay you for your solution. And she has come out on the other side now, understanding that she wants to build a class pass for quality in-person events for people that are not in relationships to meet in person. They're also for people that are in relationships, but it's geared towards this community of people that really do want to meet in real life. And she doesn't have to be the event planner, and she doesn't have to buy a physical space to hold all the events. And that's just a brilliant new solution that came out of asking more questions.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds like more cost effective too, because like you said, she doesn't have to build anything. And like she's pivoted a lot in her idea. Like,
Well, we got her to a place where she could build an MVP on her own without a technical co-founder. And that's one of the things I'm really passionate about, is that it seems that the people that really care about the human side of technology don't have a technical background. And so they run around thinking they need to find a software developer, they need to find a technical co-founder, they need investors so that they can pay software developers. And the reality is there's so much more of your business that you can do without a technical co-founder. And what we found with Christina and Underground Unattached is that she's actually piloting this new idea right now on Squarespace, using the skill sets she has without relying on someone, without relying on making a huge investment or giving up any part of her company to technical people that just might not be as connected with her mission as she is.
Yeah. And to me too, that sounds like an innovative approach, but also like the lowest hanging fruit, right? Because like you said, she doesn't need to go out and do this crazy thing. She's leveraging what she already has. And that's the best, easiest place to start.
Yeah, right. And, if you want to convince investors to invest in your business, or you want to convince a technical co-founder or another co-founder to join you through sweat equity, so you're not paying them, they are putting themselves into the business as well, you're only going to convince them if you have a rock solid plan that lays out your mission, your marketing plan and strategy, your tactics, how those tactics are going to make you money, and help you reach the next phase. And you need that rock solid plan to present to investors if you want money, and you need that rock solid plan to present to a co-founder if you want their buy-in. And that rock solid plan is not technology. That is marketing, customer research. That's, testing a minimal viable product that doesn't have to be in code. You're just testing the basic assumptions of the entire business, and you're creating kind of the yellow brick road. And this is how I help people, creating that clear path to move forward.
Yeah. Thank you, Lindsay. This is awesome. I want to save some time for Q&A. Before we get to that, I would love to ask you, what is some advice or 2 to 3 points of advice that you could give the women in the Work Bigger community? And you're also a member, you're part of our group, so I feel like you know the women, but women who are looking to really do big things with their work and life. So a lot of the women in the group are in transition. So what advice do you have for them to be able to make that transition successfully?
Well, Belma, I came prepared.
Yay!
I actually have my rules of the game up here, and I'll try my best to make sure that everyone can see this.
Awesome.
So the first one is that leaders are learners. So never stop learning. Always be willing to teach yourself new things. If you're an entrepreneur, if you're doing big things, you have to be able to teach yourself new things. Either you teach it yourself or you go find people that can help you learn it. Okay? 2, this is my favorite. This is something that my dad used to say to me, and I haven't found a quote, a source for it. In order to be outstanding, you have to be willing to stand out. Okay? So when you're scared of something, that means you have to go do it, right? And you and I have talked a lot about that, but I tell myself this all the time. So you have to be willing to stand out, and that can be really scary. I get, people are surprised because I'm extroverted and I come off very confident, but I'm scared a lot of the time when I put myself out there. But I know that if I don't put myself out there, then I'm not going to get where I want to be. Okay. The third thing is nothing's impossible. And this goes back to what we were talking about just before. People, again, don't sit with a problem long enough, or don't teach them selves things, and they think that something's impossible. Now, the straightforward way that you thought of to get to your goal, that might be impossible. But there's always a path around a big boulder. You don't actually have to walk over the big boulder. You can walk around. It kind of reminds me of living in San Francisco, where you could walk straight up California Street, but that will be very painful. It's one of the most steep streets out there. Or you could choose to walk like 2 blocks out and then up Pacific, and that would be not as steep and easier to get up, right? So I don't like it. If I hear anyone tell me that their software developer said something was impossible, I call BS. Nothing's impossible, okay? And the 4th is something that my dad also used to share with me. I told you before, both my parents are self-employed, and that's be willing to paint walls. The entrepreneurial journey, the journey to greatness, everyone says it's really a lot of like fail, success, right? It's not a straight line. And in down moments, maybe you're not making enough money that month. Maybe you want access to someone, but you have to do some pro bono work to get access to that person. Whatever it is, be willing to paint walls. If someone wants to hire you to paint a room and you need the money, go paint the walls, okay? And it's funny because 2 weeks ago I was in an elevator in a building and a painter walked into the elevator and he was complaining about the paint job, like not wanting to do this paint job, and I just started laughing. And I told him the story, and he was like, well, let me know if you ever want to paint some walls.
I love it.
Yeah, so those are my 4 rules, and kind of, I don't know if you would call them mantras. I definitely, in order to be outstanding, you have to be willing to stand out, is something that I say to myself fairly often.
I love it. Thank you, Lindsay. I would love to open it up now for any questions from our group. Does anyone have anything to share? Let me check Facebook Live too. Let's see. Hi, Stephanie. We have 2 Stephanies on. Okay, it looks like there are no questions. Well, a couple of things that I want to cover then before we jump off. Lindsay, how can everyone find you?
I shared a link with you.
Yes.
It's lindsayt.com, but go to lindsayt.com and then type in work bigger. So work bigger. That's where you can find me. You can also find me on Instagram. I love a good whiteboard, guys. Here I am on Instagram. So it's _LindsayT_.
And you're also in the Work Bigger community, so the ladies can find you there too, right?
Yeah, you can find me there. And if you would like to talk one-on-one about anything I do have, you can book me calendar that I will share if you shoot me a message.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. A couple of other things that I want to call out before we jump off. We have a few events coming up for Work Bigger too. So I'm going to just include them here in the chat. I'll include them on Facebook as well. We're doing a happy hour. Lindsay, I wish you were here in New York. Though I know you visit from time to time. We're doing a happy hour on 10/10, and that is almost full. I actually got booked fully this morning, but I opened a couple of more spots. We're doing an event on money, career change and money. So become your own boss without breaking the bank. So it touches on some of the stuff we talked about here today, since a lot of it does cover entrepreneurship. And then thank you, Lindsay, for sharing the DISC assessment. I'll make sure to also share that in the Facebook chat. And Stephanie says, thank you so much, Lindsay. You're figuring this out way quicker than I did, but I'm actually breathless hearing your story. I am that excited. I have a feeling our paths will meet again.
Thank you. I hope so. I'd love to get to know you more.
Yeah, Stephanie is awesome. And Leah too, they're both on. So yeah, that's it. I'll let everyone go, but Lindsay, just want to thank you again. Honestly, it's been incredible getting to know you, working with you. I feel like we've become each other's advisors. Your advice and guidance and story are absolutely invaluable, and I just feel so grateful to be sharing it with the community today. So thank you again.
Thank you so much. I'm glad we finally got to do this.
Yay! All right. Have a good day. Chat soon. Bye.